Welcome to the Heretical Heathenry podcast. I am your host, Robert Knox. It's been a while. The Wisconsin weather has me feeling a bit down. The seasonal affective disorder is in full swing, so I took a few weeks off. The weather kind of made me lethargic. With that said, let's get into today's topic, which is going to be folkism. Take a moment and look at the world around you. We live in a world of incredible access, but profound spiritual poverty. We have every grimoire, every saga, and every translation at our fingertips. Yet many of us feel like ghosts in our own lives. Welcome back. It's been a few weeks, and today I want to start with the question that we often gloss over in our rush to perform rituals or debate lore. And that question is, what is the aim of religion? Why are we dedicating so much of our precious finite time to the activities of spirit? In our modern era, we've been sold a lie that spirituality is a lifestyle choice, like picking a brand of coffee, or choosing which soda gives you the best hit of dopamine. For many in the modern spiritual or occult marketplace, the answer is simple. It's all preferences and aesthetics. It's hurdles all the way down. We treat the gods like software we can download onto our phones. We're told that all paths lead to the same mountain peak, so it shouldn't matter which trail we take. If you like to look at the Norse Trail today, take it. If you prefer the Egyptian one tomorrow, swap it out. We flatten the gods into interchangeable products in a marketplace of meaning. But for those of us walking the path of the heathen, that answer isn't enough. We're searching for a proper path up the mountain. And today we're going to talk about one of those things we're not supposed to talk about, a boogeyman topic in Germanic spaces, and that's folkism. But we aren't talking about the political caricature you see on social media. We're going to talk about the metaphysics of blood. Does it make sense to search for a path up the mountain that goes beyond our inherited particulars? Or is the most powerful magic in the roots you already have? Can we, as heathens and as magicians, develop a new arena for the folkish path? One that isn't built strictly on hate, but a profound biological and psychological reality of who we actually are as people. At the root of the world's religious tradition lies a common intuition that we are not merely biological machines. It seems obvious enough. We're not just meat computers responding to stimuli, but rather we are a whole ensouled being, inhabiting an ensouled cosmos, and we're capable of reaching beyond ourselves towards the divine. Now, to understand this reaching, I often find myself turning back towards the Greeks, specifically the Neoplatonists. They had a word for this ascent of the soul. It's anagoge, and the chief aim was henosis, which is sort of like a direct union with the divine. And I know it might seem a little strange for a Germanic pagan to start quoting Greek philosophy, but we have to be honest about our history. The Germanic peoples were colonized before they could develop a formal, written philosophical system. Sure, we have bits and pieces of the lore, but nothing that looks like Stoicism or Platonism or anything that Aristotle wrote. Their wisdom was lived, it wasn't lectured. So we have to look to other pre-Christian cultures to better understand the metaphysics of the ancient world. And think about it, we inhabit a shared cosmos, so it stands to reason that the Germanic peoples would develop a worldview that aligns with the Greeks. And the evidence is there if you look for it. If you comb through the Havamal, you'll note a lot of what appears to be deep, rugged Stoicism. And if you look in the Voluspa or Snorri's Edda, the creation accounts align with Platonic reasoning. But why does that matter for us today? Because for the Greeks, philosophy wasn't just logic chomping. It wasn't just about winning an argument, it wasn't rhetoric. It was a transformative process that oriented the psyche or the soul. It was a way of being in the world. Whether it's the Stoics seeking to tune the soul to the rational logos, or the Platonists unchaining themselves from the cave to witness the sun, they were seeking an active transformation, a real transformative ascent up the mountain. And for the later Platonists, like Iamblichus, that ascent eventually required more than just thought or contemplation. It required ritual, and it required what we call theurgy. Now, if you've been around for a while and you've listened to my few episodes, or read some of the stuff that I've written, I talk about theurgy a lot, and a lot of that is me sort of trying to get better at explaining the idea to others. Now, when we talk about theurgy, or literally God work, we're talking about more than just prayer. For the later Platonists like Proclus and Iamblichus, the human mind wasn't powerful enough to climb the mountain on its own. We needed help. We needed a bridge of some sort. They believed the gods had impressed signatures or tokens into the material world, a thing they called synthemata. I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, but stick with me. These were specific symbols and materials that act as a sort of metaphysical magnet, drawing the soul upwards towards the divine. But here's the crucial part that modern universalists might miss. Theurgy isn't just generic. Now let's pause for a second. What do we mean when we say theurgy isn't generic? Well, in the modern occult world, there's a school that gained popularity, I think in the 70s. It's called chaos magic. And it's really popular today. It's the belief that belief itself is only a tool. Chaos magicians are well known for what they call paradigm jumping. It's believing one thing today and then changing it out tomorrow. Maybe if you want to call Odin Thoth or Zeus, it's all the same energy, so it really doesn't matter as long as you have the right, adequate belief. But the theurgist and the heathen ought to know better. Iamblichus argued that these synthemata, these divine signatures, were not created by humans. We didn't just make them up because they looked cool. They were impressed into the fabric of reality by the gods themselves. You can think of it kind of like chemistry. If you want to create a fire, you need to align specific elements. You can't just believe that water is gasoline and expect the flame to catch. The universe has a specific structure. Theurgy is the same. A divine name like Odin isn't just a label. It's a seed word, a specific vibration that is attuned to a specific divine frequency. When a culture has spent thousands of years interacting with that frequency, carving its runes, singing its Gulder, and pouring blood to its name, they're not just believing in a story, they're clearing a metaphysical channel that allows the magic to flow. Each culture has discovered genuine points of contact, for lack of a better phrase. And because these points of contact are rooted in specific landscapes, the cold, jagged peaks of the north versus the sun-drenched sands of the Nile, the keys they developed are irreducible. You can't just swap out a Norse hammer for an Egyptian was-skepter. That's probably horribly mispronounced, and I apologize to anyone interested in Egyptian stuff for listening, and expect the same current to flow. They are different tools for different currents. And if we accept that the tools themselves are particular, then we have to accept that the practitioner is particular too. Which leads us to the heart of the matter, the relationship between the blood and the rite. Oh, I love saying blood and rite. It offends a lot of people. Something about mentioning blood just makes people really uncomfortable. And I'm going to keep using it for that reason. It's like a pattern disruptor. The tokens of a ritual are not arbitrary. You cannot simply substitute a divine name or a sacred symbol for another and expect the same result. Each is a genuine, specific point of contact. Now, think of it like a radio frequency. You don't get the same station by dialing a random number. You have to be precise. And this has profound implications for how we understand the relationship between a people and their god. If the techne of divine ascent is always particular, if it's rooted in specific symbols, specific stories, and specific ways of being in the world, then it follows that different peoples will develop their own irreducible paths, shaped by their own unique landscapes, their own unique histories, and their unique trials. They discover specific keys that fit their specific locks. And it's from this foundation, this understanding that spiritual contact is precise and particular, that we have to approach the question of folkism and heathenry. So let's say the word, the big bad word that everyone's so afraid of and that triggers so many people, folkism. Simply put, folkism is the idea that we ought to follow the paths of our ancestors. Now, I know that there is a spell cast on this word in the modern West. There's an immediate attempt to link any defense of folkism, specifically among European paganisms, with ethno-nationalism or white supremacy. But we have to look at this with clear eyes. A Japanese person practicing Shinto, or a Yoruba person practicing Ifa, or a Hindu practicing their ancestral traditions is not considered a supremacist for doing so. They are seen as honoring a sacred continuity, and the folkish heathen should be seen as no different. They deserve that same dignity. And so why does this matter? Why now? Well, in the West, especially here in America, Europeans are sort of a lost people. We are more like a diaspora folk born on foreign soil, cut off from our roots. Our stories have remained in somber silence for a long time. For us, the folkish path isn't necessarily about politics, it's more like an act of recovery. It's reaching back through that silence towards something that was taken. And that sentiment is important, but these roots do run deeper than just feeling. They run down to where the Norns dwell. Alright, I'm going to go a bit off the rails here and talk a little bit about biology, which I'm not exactly an expert on, but I'm going to bring it up nonetheless, because I think it's important for the argument. It's common in our biological understanding that we are shaped by our ancestors. That shouldn't be too controversial. From the color of your eye to the architecture of your bones, you were the result of a long chain of inheritance. But what's less commonly acknowledged is that culture itself is a part of that inheritance. The work of researcher Joseph Heinrich had demonstrated the cultural practices maintained over enough generations can drive genuine genetic selection. The most famous example is lactose persistent. The ability for a Northern European adult to digest milk co-evolved with the pastoral cattle cultures of that region. The practices shaped the people, and the people shaped themselves around the pastoral practice, becoming inseparable. Now, if a mundane practice like dairy farming can shape a person's biology, what does a religious practice do? Now, a religion isn't just a set of ideas that you agree with. It isn't just propositions. It governs your diet, your perception of time, your social attitudes, and your most fundamental orientation towards the universe. Across thousands of years, a people habituated to a particular way of approaching the sacred gradually become the kind of people for whom that approach resonates at a level below mere conscious choice. Just as some populations have genetically adapted to high-altitude, low-oxygen environments, the genetic folk have spent a millennia habituating to the frequency of the north. We have become a key for a very specific lock, to use that metaphor again. Now, if biology marks the outmost root of our identity, the psychological is where that root blooms internally. To understand this, we have to look at one of the most unsettling and profound observations in the 20th century, at least in psychology. In 1936, Carl Jung wrote an essay simply titled Wotan. He was watching a sudden frenzied storm-like energy move through the German people. Now, a historian might look at that and talk about economics or politics, but Jung, the dreamer with the lamp, saw something deeper. He proposed that Wotan, the Germanic god of the storm, frenzy, and inspiration, had possessed the folk. For those of you unfamiliar with Jung, you've undoubtedly heard this idea of the collective unconscious. He argued that we aren't just us. Beneath our personal thoughts lies a universal layer of archetypes, a primordial pattern, or patterns in this case, that shape all human experience. But the Wotan essay highlights a critical distinction, I think. It's like, while the deepest layers might be universal, the particular expressions are not. They're particular. Different folk, through long cohabitation with specific mythological image, develop a sort of like folk unconscious, for lack of a better word, that is distinctly patterned. It is tuned again to a specific frequency. For the Germanic people, Wotan wasn't just a character in a story. He was a particular instantiation of a universal pattern. The wanderer, the frenzied warrior, the magician seeking wisdom. This pattern lived with our ancestors for millennia. It shaped their laws, their poetry, and their very way of being in the world. Sustained imaginal habitation, living with these stories for hundreds of generations, leaves a mark on the psyche just as surely as living in high altitudes leaves a mark on the genome. The god and the folk shape each other. Over time, they become that lock and key. This is why, when a person of Germanic heritage encounters runes or the name of Odin, it often feels less like learning and more like a remembering. You aren't discovering something new. You're waking up to a pattern that has been sleeping in the dark corners of your own mind for a very, very long time. And this leads us back to magic, and it leads us back to theurgy. So how exactly does this tie back to ritual? How does the Neoplatonist descent meet a heathen's ancestry? For Iamblichus, ritual wasn't just symbolic, it was metaphysical. The specific names, the offerings, the symbols, these sunthemata are links. They're signatures impressed by the gods into the worlds around us to draw us upwards towards the one. But if we accept everything we've just talked about today, the biological coevolution, the Jungian folk unconscious, that lock and key of the soul, then we have to realize the practitioner is a part of the ritual chemistry. When you stand in a temple, you're not a blank slate. You come carrying the full depth of who you are, the inherited dispositions, the archetypal patterns, and the imaginal landscape that your ancestors spent millennia scoring into your psyche. A person of Germanic heritage doesn't approach the gods with empty hands. They come carrying 1,000-year-old momentum. And this is why ancestry might matter for magic. If theurgy works through specific, non-interchangeable points of contact, then the most natural path towards henosis, toward union, is through the gods and practices that your own psyche and biology are already tuned to recognize. The universalist impulse tells us that all paths are the same. It sounds generous, but it's actually a flattening of the sacred. It treats the gods like products and the soul like a consumer. But to take the gods seriously is to take their particularity seriously. It is to recognize that Odin is not Zeus, and the meat of poetry is not the same as ambrosia. It's recognizing that the coevolution of a people and their gods create a real and deep channel of connection that can't be replicated by a library card or just vibes, man. The folkish path, properly understood, isn't about building walls or harboring hate. It's about tending to your roots. It's an act of radical recovery in a world that wants us to be lost, in a world that wants us just to be consumers, blank slates. It asks us to honor the ways of our ancestors and the ways they reach towards the divine, and walk the paths they've already partially cleared through the wilderness. You're not just a ghost in your own life. You're not just an individual. You're a node on a web. You're a continuation. So step into the circle and honor the blood and reach for the high one and with everything that you are. And if you want to check more of this out, I've posted the full article exploring these sort of Platonic and Jungian roots on my Substack, which is also Heretical Heathenry. So please, feel free to check it out. And I just want to be clear, at the end of the day, I personally don't care what you do. You can worship any god you want, any frame you want. You be you. But I don't think that's good for people. And I think that we should try to move out of this modern way of being and stop acting like we're just individuals disconnected from everything. And we should go back, at least in some sense, go back and find out what our ancestors did and try to understand what they did, because part of what they did molded who we are today. I'm Heretical Heathenry. This has been a great episode. Thank you for tuning in, and have a wonderful night.